Hello, dog fans, and welcome to DawgDial on the CRM Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Josh Mendlinger, with my co-host and partner, Taco Thompson. Welcome to DawgDial. We are the weekly show talking about all things Georgia Bulldogs football and Georgia Bulldogs sports as we get through the multiple seasons. But welcome again to our DawgDial fans, and we are ready to talk everything Bulldogs and all about this past game. That
31-3.
You betcha. Great
Bulldogs
game.
Bulldogs. Bulldogs on Bulldogs.
We talked about it last week.
In Athens.
You got it. The Bulldog Fest was a great matchup going into it, and the Georgia Bulldogs have prevailed, and they showed their power in the SEC, kind of showing who they are and stepping up, I think you could say, to their first challenge, but first SEC, really a big opponent.
The heart of the schedule. We'll recap the game.
We will get into that.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. Talk about some key performances, some nuggets.
We'll get into our nuggets, absolutely.
And talk about maybe something else happening, other things happening in the SEC, and talk about what's coming up next week in the show.
You got it. We're going to talk about everything that from coaches to key plays, key players, as well as what's going to come up next for opponents for the Georgia Bulldogs. But we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back. We're broadcasting on a network of radio stations and Facebook Live here at Buffalo's Cafe in Woodstock, Georgia. We'll be right back with DawgDial. Stay tuned.
Good.
Up. About there. Put you about. I'm going to put you about there. Not that one. Okay. All right. Welcome back to DawgDial on the CRM Broadcasting Network. We are here in Buffalo's Cafe in Woodstock, Georgia, talk all things Georgia Bulldogs sports and especially Georgia Bulldogs football this week. We are going to be broadcasting here, and thankfully to our invite of our hosts here at Buffalo's Cafe, our servers. We have some great servers, some great folks here to enjoy some good food. Come on down, join us for our broadcast. And you can check us out and information on DawgDial on Facebook, also on crmsports.com. You can go to our CRM Sports website and get all information about DawgDial as we are broadcasting throughout the World Wide Web and talking about Georgia Bulldogs.
And let's plug Bash Night, since that's what the Bulldogs did.
They did. That is a good way to say it. Here at Buffalo's Cafe.
31-3. How about
31-3? Yeah.
Contest there? What do you think about that game?
I did like it, and let's talk about that before we go on. Just to remind folks, because we're talking about bashing of the Mississippi State Bulldogs here on Mondays and Wednesdays is
Bash Night.
Is Wing Bash Night, and it's all-you-can-eat wings here at Buffalo's Cafe. Come on down, join them. But let's get right into the heart of things. Let's recap and talk about this bashing that Georgia Bulldogs did against their SEC opponent this past week. Taco Thompson, what do you say?
Well, while we're on the dog theme, let's talk about fleas. How about that open flea-flicker?
He's going all out this week, aren't you?
An excellent call. Jim Chaney, I thought that was a great way to open the game. You've got a lot of momentum built up for this game. Mississippi State, obviously coming off of that big win against LSU. LSU maybe not as strong as they had been, but in the SEC West, they're still a player. Mississippi State beats them. The anticipation for this game coming up is we'll see who the Dogs are. Mm-hmm. What a good open in
SEC
the very first play of the game.
Absolutely. Great way to come out, way to make a statement. It definitely was a statement play, coming out, putting the showing the confidence that this Georgia Bulldog coaching staff has in not only their front line and their running backs, but also in their true freshman quarterback, and putting the ball in his hands right off the bat and putting the ball way downfield to Godwin.
Yeah, really good start to the game. You had an opening quarter in the first quarter, 14-0, and you like to see that. Georgia didn't score in the second quarter, but going into halftime at 14-3, we held Mississippi State, who had a potent offense coming into the game. We had heard about it. And Georgia vaunted Georgia defense held them to just 3 points the entire game, and those three coming in the first half. So I think overall, if you look at the elements of the game, I thought Fromm looked really good.
Yes.
Really steady. Obviously started out 8 for 8 in the contest. I thought the play calling was good. Coach Chaney had Fromm under center, if you saw that, a lot of the night. So that was a little bit different wrinkle. You saw some up-tempo from the offense. And I think really what Georgia fans really liked is they got to see the balance between run and pass. I think we were 200. I'll look at the exact stat numbers, but I think it was 202
in
rushing and 204 in the passing game. So that's what you like to see.
And what do you think about Taco? What do you think about the, I guess you could say, the variety of backs that the coaching staff was showing in their arsenal of running backs? It wasn't just the Sony Michel and Nick Chubb show.
Well, Chubb put on a show that shows you why he's one of the best backs in the country.
Absolutely did.
One of the runs that he had was just outstanding. Not only does he have great vision, he had great balance on his touchdown run. The 7-yard run. He
put his hand down and still gets in.
Yeah, just outstanding. But here's the other thing that you see about Georgia. Michel is still probably not 100% back from his injury, but what you're starting to see is the stable of Georgia running backs.
Absolutely.
I think what you're starting to see is who Chubb and Michel are going to graduate this year, and already you're starting to see two names that pop out at me: DeAndre Swift and Brian Harrion.
Yes.
As two running backs that are getting some carries, getting some game action in SEC.
And what a great name to have for a running back, Swift. What do you think about that?
I think he's got some moves.
He does.
DeAndre Quick, he could be DeAndre Swift. He is a good-looking running back.
And not just running back. I think he was good coming out of the backfield, too. I think they're all showing that they have not only legs, but they have hands, too, which is going to be key when you have a true freshman quarterback. You need to have a couple of checkdowns if the deep threat is not there.
Yep.
And I think he will have the quarterback, Jake Fromm, will have excellent confidence that he can check down to those players, whether it is the starting two of Chubb or Sony Michel. He knows he can go to his other two from the backfield and rely on them. Not to mention that their blocking across the board
I was just
in the backfield was excellent.
The segue to that is, what I saw is really good pass blocking. If you remember a year ago, Georgia, Eason was on the run quite a bit last year.
Sure was.
And this game, Fromm came out of the gates 8 for 8. Of course, he was very accurate. I think he was 9 for 12 on the whole night. 1 was a throwaway ball, 2 were drops. So Fromm was very accurate, but you got to give credit to that offensive line, not only opening the holes, but also on pass protection. Fromm had time to throw. He had open lanes. The backs, when I saw them, rush to the hole. Sure, they have some shifty moves, but that offensive line did create some holes. So offensively, I think overall, and again, the game planning and the play calling, a lot of people criticize, Jim Chaney's play calling. I think his play calling was right on the mark.
I think so, too.
In the game against Mississippi State.
Sure, especially coming against Mississippi State, who had a tremendous game the previous week. They were showing that they had a great defense, or at least up to this point. They were showing a good defense. They had a couple of great plays the previous week. In fact, their leading tackler from the previous week. His name's getting away from me at the moment, but he was left with, I believe, not even an individual tackle on the day. Yep. Number 54, I believe he's their, I think he was their nose tackle, or he was just his name was all over the place with the broadcast the week before, and this week there was no mention of his name. He was shut down.
Georgia's gaining respect on a national level here for their offense. Also, let's plug the defense here again. You shut down Mississippi State, that Nick Fitzgerald, a Georgia product, by the way, and just shut down the overall game plan for Mississippi State. They really couldn't ever get anything started, and it was because of the play of the defense. Roquan Swift, J.R. Reed, Bellamy, Carter.
Sure.
A lot of players on Georgia's defense aggressively pursuing the ball. So the team speed on Georgia, the offense and defense, just looked very good Saturday night.
Yeah, we'll get into that, and actually in a little bit we'll talk about key performances. We'll highlight a few individual players and their stats and their performances for this game. We will also talk about how they shut down the key players for and key performers for Mississippi State, as we briefly mentioned before, and I think we will be able to have some great feedback from our fans out there as well. We'd love to hear from you on our Facebook Live. Feel free to comment in. We're monitoring it. We'll be able to chat. We'd love to get some of your comments through that. We'll be right back on DawgDial, and we will get back to more Georgia Bulldogs football talk. So go Dogs, stick with us. All right, we're back. Welcome back to DawgDial here at Buffalo's Cafe in Woodstock, Georgia. I'm your host, Josh Mendlinger, with my partner, Taco Thompson, here to talk more about the Georgia Bulldogs football win over Mississippi State. Talking about fleas, dogs, and fleas, right? As we open up our show. They opened up their show of the ball game with an amazing flea-flicker play. It actually caught, I think, Mississippi State by absolute surprise. They were looking for the pure run start to this game, thinking that Georgia would just use that arsenal, as we talked about, the arsenal of running backs. But they came out with that flea flicker from Chubb.
Your favorite receiver.
Sent him all the way down to Godwin, number 5 Godwin, and he grabs a touchdown catch, of which at that point, once we get into the game, that was his 7th catch of the year. And 4 of them were for touchdowns.
How about that?
How about that for Terry Godwin?
That's production.
That's efficiency at its best. How about
He's got
that?
Some hands. I haven't seen him drop any passes either.
He had one during the game. We'll talk about third, fourth quarter, of which he knew it right away as he grabbed his head. It went right into him. As we've talked about, Jake Fromm has been hitting people in the numbers. His accuracy level was wonderful, I guess you could say. All you could ask for from a coaching perspective for Fromm, and with his percentage, his quarterback percentage must have been through the roof.
Yeah, I think the quarterback rating is way up there, which brings in a segment here, talk about the Fromm Eason. I noticed Eason was dressed out in the game.
No more crutch, yes.
Closer to the action. I think Coach Smart said that was a little bit of a decoy to have him dressed out. Didn't have any intentions of playing him, but we're going to have a decision to make. Coach Smart, the coaching staff, is going to have a decision to make coming up here fairly soon.
Sure thing.
As Eason gets healthy and Fromm is playing well. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that they're going to have to think about this, talk about this. But my perspective at this point is this true freshman in Fromm is coming out. He's throwing laser beams to his players, it seems like. And when he's throwing the ball and they're not catching it, he's intelligently throwing it away. He did have, one interception this past game, but I don't think it was necessarily the worst interception that you've seen from a Georgia quarterback over the years. But I think he will be the person they need to lean on until he proves that he can't handle the pressure.
Yeah, I think it's a good analysis. I think the job is Fromm's to have until you see some bumps in the road. I do think Eason will see some action. But I think for the most part, you got something good going. You keep that. You stay with what's bringing the wins, especially in a dominating fashion like this one Saturday, and you stay with it. You're surrounded by a good cast. We've talked about the stable of running backs that Georgia has.
Sure thing.
It's absolutely outstanding, and so. I think what we have to do is not call this a controversy. It's just a quarterback competition, simply what it is.
Yeah, well, it's going to shake out not only on the but during practice this week to see where Eason has progressed after this slight injury. That little setback. Let's say it's more of a setback, I guess you could call it, than a true injury.
Sure.
And we'll see what's going on going into a. Well, I guess you could say we'll talk about it at the end of our show today, but really going up to Tennessee and seeing if Jake Fromm can handle that pressure. He showed it going up into a very hostile environment going against Notre Dame, and he did well. And then we'll see what happens. But SEC is a whole different ballgame. Pardon the pun, but it is. It truly is. And going into Tennessee, as we'll cover a little bit later, that might be somewhere he might buckle. We don't know, and until he gets through that and shows that he can handle that pressure, we definitely need to make sure Eason is ready. And
the good news
there.
is the Georgia defense held the opponent to 3 points.
Outstanding.
That's a pretty good script for the quarterback, taking a little bit of the pressure off the quarterback.
Absolutely.
When you look at, and the great things, transition to defense here a little bit, again, played lights out. We had two interceptions for the first time this year, so we kind of got in the black on turnovers. That was good to see. So you had Baker and Sanders get in on 2 intercepts, which interrupted Mississippi State drives against a pretty decent quarterback. So you have to give credit and key performances to the CNS. If you look at where Georgia is in the turnover battle year to date, I looked up some of these numbers. Mm-hmm. You want to be in the plus category season-wise with your turnovers. I think Georgia coming into this game was about even. And,
a little lower, I think, is actually
a successful team.
Yeah.
If you look at the Alabamas of the world, some of those at the top, they're normally, on average, per game in the plus 1.5, 2 category. So, it'd be good to see a few more turnovers from that defense. Already playing great. The line, the linebackers, and the coverage crew just did an outstanding job. 3 points against a team that the previous week had put up 37 on it.
Well, they were the leading offense in the SEC. If I am not mistaken, stat-wise, I believe Mississippi State came into this as the leading offense as far as getting points in the SEC this year. Well, it may be the SEC West, but it's still they were tops in the in the league considered. So I think that was I'd have to agree with you that the defense did stand up. They did well. They showed that they don't have a lot of weaknesses in the defense right now. I didn't see too many.
One of the things that I saw out there is just absolute team speed. I mean, when you play Georgia against Georgia's defense, you may see an open hole, but that's going to close pretty fast. The defensive backs are going to be able to close on the ball really fast. Mm-hmm. So incredibly, you see a lot of red shirts out in the open field. You had mentioned earlier that they're pretty sure-handled tacklers.
It is, and that is something that I'm sure the Kirby Smart era has been instilling in them. It's something that I think over the years past has been a problem, that they were going out there, maybe a little too much reaching with the arms and their hands, hand-arm tackling, trying to get that big hit in. Mm-hmm. That's what players today are they want that ESPN hit, or that highlight hit, so they can be on every sports network with the big blow to their opponent. But I think the team is buying into the Kirby Smart mentality, the Kirby Smart type of defense, where they're all going to do the wrapping up. They're all going to be getting to the ball. You have almost 11 players getting to every tackle. And that team mentality on defense. And
discipline. One of the things that is not mentioned very often about defense is assignment football. So you have to manage your assignments, stay within your game. That makes you a good unit, and we didn't have any blown coverages. You didn't see people out of position. You really also in this game, I got to say, there are not many penalties in this game. That's the Georgia of the past, and maybe even this season. So, this Coach Smart team is playing with a good amount of discipline, and that helps when everybody's executing on their own assignments.
Excuse me.
Tact.
Right.
Throw in a wrinkle here and there. I like the way Georgia is looking. It's hard to scheme against our run-pass game. You think you come in, you're going to shut down that run. What happened? Threw a flea-flicker right out of the box.
I agree.
Even though you know the run is coming, it's hard to stop. And then when you come in here, and by the way, over across the way was a ex-Georgia defensive guy, coordinator was Grantham.
Yes.
He came in with a plan to try to stop that Georgia team. He probably knows what's coming, has a good idea, and you can't stop it.
Right.
On the other hand, you've got just a very talented defensive unit that is laden with seniors. It has that Kirby Smart mojo about it. Feels like it. Senior leadership, lots of returning starters, and just, Georgia, I think, even on the national scene, beating Mississippi State the way they did, I think they raised their value
Absolutely. I think
the upcoming polls.
I'll agree with you there, Taco. The fact is, most people, when you say Georgia Bulldogs, they start talking about what? The 1-2, the shake and bake, the backfield of our running backs. I might have to say, after this game and what they've done, our string of linebackers might be some of the tops in the nation going on. If in the SEC, if not in the nation, some top-rated or need to be top-rated linebackers with what they did show this week.
Linebackers and DBs are doing it. The top names that we know of, the Bellamy's, the Lorenzo Carters, our number one tackler in the game was J.R. Reed.
Right.
He's coming up from a cornerback. The will linebacker is Roquan Swift.
Right.
He is all over the field. So
he's in, it seems to be everywhere on the every tackle. He seems to be in on every tackle, if not hovering around that last moment of someone else getting tackled, and he's ready to lay the hammer down.
And Georgia has the scheme where they can contain a run-pass dual threat. Doesn't bother Georgia with that kind of team speed.
Sure.
So, and then one thing we should mention that's mistake-free when we're highlighting players is also our special teams looks very, very solid.
Mm-hmm.
Blankenship is kicking it out of the end zone when he's asked to kick those extra points, field goals. He's doing a good job. The punting game looks good. We haven't broken anything on the returns. We had one in a previous week that was called back.
Sure.
But I'm waiting for some of these return guys to get a little mojo too. So look for that maybe in the weeks.
That will certainly give an even bigger boost of confidence to this team if the special teams can pick up a few points and put them on the board, because I agree, a winning team has to be scoring on offense, defense, and on special teams.
At least
if you're going to go on
good field position.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that allows your offense to rest a little bit, so to speak. They don't have to drive the length of the field every time. Your defense gets a rest, but they get fired up and charged when they see that that they've held off a team, making them go 3 and out. And then we have a good run back on a punt, then it would be certainly, a confidence boost to the defense. And if they have to go back out there and quickly, or just to go back out there, they don't mind. Those dogs don't mind getting after it if there's been some productivity when they're off the field.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more, as well as any injuries and notes, and get into some SEC talk and the future of the schedule for the Georgia Bulldogs. So stick with us. We're going to take another little break here on DawgDial. We'll be right back. All right. All right, Facebook Live fans, how you doing out there? Before we get going again, we'll say a shout-out to our Facebook Live followers today on DawgDial.
Thanks for joining in.
Yes, we've had a couple comments on our DawgDial comment line. What's that?
I mean, thousands.
Oh, we've had, it's overwhelming. I can't keep up with them. I talk about, not to jinx, nobody wants to jinx a good start to the year, but we do have a comment in from Jimmy. Thanks, Jimmy, about talking about how he's ready to go ahead and schedule the Alabama versus Georgia for the SEC championship game. So we'll roll into that. So we'll talk. Hold on, Jimmy. We'll get to that.
Let's jump ahead.
We'll jump ahead. So we'll be right back as we get ourselves ready for this next segment on DawgDial. So we'll be right here.
I thought you were opening this segment when they did that.
All right, welcome back to DawgDial on the CRM Broadcast Network. We are broadcasting on Facebook Live here from Buffalo's Cafe in Woodstock, Georgia on Highway 92. I'm Josh Mendlinger with my co-host Joel Taco Thompson, and we are talking all things Georgia Bulldogs and football for that game just this past week against the Mississippi State SEC opponent, and we want to talk about a few things with the way they opened up this game, the way that the players responded to this game, and were ready to go during the broadcast at halftime. If you want to say, I know one of the halftime interviewers got a quote from one of the. Basically she was interviewing one of the coaches, and she mentioned that the Georgia Bulldogs defense punched Mississippi State in the mouth, basically. And that's the way they opened up this game. And it seems to be the defensive coaching really did come out saying, hey, we're going to put a world of hurt on the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And, Taco, you think they came through with that?
I think we did, and let's talk a little bit about the culture of Georgia football, and we might as well go ahead and compare and contrast the Mark Richt coach staff as compared to the Kirby Smart, and everybody wants to talk about Alabama. I mean, they are the measuring stick in the SEC.
Sure are.
And obviously that's where Coach Smart came from. Also, Mel Tucker, who is also on the staff as the defensive coordinator, spent some time at Alabama too, and understands that a solid defense can get you closer to a championship game. So
that's been said before. Defense wins championships, huh?
And I think it's a little cliche, but even now that the Georgia, I saw some quotes, post-game quotes, even Chubb was talking about, man, I would not want to run against the Georgia defense, just how good they are. And I think really what that is I think that's a culture shift. I think defense, you see the meanness, you see a Georgia dog defense, and really I can't remember the last time it's been talked about on radio or in papers or in media, the Georgia defense. Always a lot of chatter about the offense, the running backs. You just start to see it on the field now, and I think it's one of the things about the culture change is a Mel Tucker defense. It looks pretty stout.
I can absolutely agree with you on that. I think we've had a few standouts in the past few years, individuals that have shown their abilities and be able to influence a game. However, I think it's across the board. It's all 11 players on the defense that right now are stepping up and making things happen, and you almost don't know where it's going to come from. There's a level of consistency where it's coming from everybody, but you can't, if you're an opponent, you can't, it's hard to scheme against that when everybody's clicking and everybody's buying into that defensive scheme that has been sold in by the coaches.
And I think that's where it is. I think there's buy-in. And I think that's buy-in not only amongst the team, but the fans. You had mentioned off air. The crowd noise.
Absolutely, that was definitely a factor. I believe it was.
And some change, and that had to have an effect on the psyche, and that's what you want at home field.
Absolutely. I mean, dog fans are notorious for being great, loyal fans, loyal to their dogs. However, I think there was just something even more clicking this past week against this Mississippi State team, that the fans were louder, they were just more engaged. Winning helps to do that. Having a positive idea or thought for their team does help people keep involved. But I think there's something special brewing.
So that culture, the culture change is not so much focus on stardom. You notice how there's this team and this unity and this talk amongst students and fans.
Sure.
And the whole thought process, and I hate to say process because that's what Saban uses, but hey, it is a process.
Yes.
All of that works together, and your fan base has to come along and believe in what you're doing.
I agree.
And the coaching staff, and I want to give a shout out here while we're talking about coaches and culture change. I don't think you can complain about the offensive play calling.
No, not
It's
at all.
always been an area of criticism, and I mentioned it earlier. I'd hate to scheme against the Georgia offense. I'd hate to scheme against the defense,
yeah.
But I sure would hate to have to scheme against a stable of 4 or 5 running backs that Georgia has.
Right, and
with
receivers.
The ability to throw accurately. Now we've got a stable of 4 or 5 receivers.
Which we hadn't had in the past, which
out.
the Bulldogs haven't had in the past.
And, hey, here's a new wrinkle on the offensive play calling. Hey, you've been calling it all season. It happened in the 4th game, but Nauta caught a touchdown pass. So
he's back in. Well, he started off strong with his well, Nauta was the go-to guy for Eason. Now Jacob Fromm is starting to get a little more comfortable with him and knowing his abilities, and they're connecting. I think Nauta stepped up, if you want to talk about that, in his blocking as well as his receiving. I think also, people are buying into this team mentality. It's not just the individual running backs anymore. It's not, when you mention Georgia Bulldogs, it's not just, we're going to talk about Nick Chubb. We're going to talk about Sonny Michel. The fullback coming in, Payne came in, and unbelievable blocking that he had led the way to several touchdowns and several big plays, and his name's getting called out, and I think that helps everyone buy into, like you said, the culture change that's going on. The Georgia Bulldogs are not a one-dimensional team anymore,
and that is probably woven into back to the culture aspect. There were 9 passes completed by Fromm. 7 different players caught those 9 passes. So yeah, it's the star mentality may be out of Athens, and maybe this team and unity theme, and it's really the hard-nosed determination. You can see that too. More discipline, more assignment roles, and just an overall it looks like a smart, well-run football team. And I'm going through offense, defense. Grading the Bulldogs, you couldn't give a B to any segment of the team in Saturday's game. They were good through and through. And again, that really goes back to coaching. You've got some great position coaches. You've got some coaches that have been in some stellar programs that came to Georgia. Obviously, that's why they're hired here at Georgia. So when you look at where the Bulldogs are versus, I don't think they could have gotten here under the Rick regime. It may just be me, but after 9-10 years of Coach Rick and the Kirby Smart in the second year has got this boat headed in the right direction.
I think it's been like we're on Facebook Live, right? We're on media. We're on the World Wide Web. I think there's been a refresh, if you want to say it. So they've refreshed the screen. They've refreshed the site. I think the team and the school has bought into that, and I think the excitement is building. Hopefully they can go far this season and make a big statement now. But I think there are good things, if not great things, in the future, hopefully starting this season and then beyond as well. And we can get into that as we come back in a few moments for our next segment and talk about the SEC opponents and some in the upcoming schedule that's coming. So stick with us, folks, on Facebook Live, but also stick with us here on DawgDial on the CRM Sports Broadcasting Network. Please, we'll be right back on DawgDial. Stick with us.
No. Inline notes.
All right, welcome back to DawgDial on the CRM Broadcasting Network. I'm Josh Mendlinger, your host, with my partner Taco Thompson, talking everything Georgia Bulldog sports and especially Georgia Bulldog football. We are here live in Woodstock, Georgia at Buffalo's Cafe, where they are serving wings and all sorts of other foods as well. You can get wings and a full menu of flatbreads and snacks and burgers and sandwiches. Great family atmosphere. Come on out and join us. If not, just come on out to Buffalo's and enjoy their great family atmosphere. You can get some food, some beverage, some great people here working here. The servers and management are wonderful. We thank them for hosting us here on DawgDial. Right now, we're going to get into a little bit of talk about the SEC and our upcoming schedule, or the upcoming schedule, must say, for the Georgia Bulldogs, as we have a few other big games coming up in Tennessee, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. And, Taco, let's get right into it as far as the status of the SEC. Where do you think the Georgia Bulldogs stand at this point?
Well, the SEC, let's go run down a little bit of the SEC. I think there was some notoriety given to the game in the week building up between the Alabama-Vandy game. Mm-hmm. One thing, lesson learned, is you don't want to make any proclamations after emotional victory, mm-hmm. like the defensive lineman from Vandy did.
Sure.
I think he said, "Alabama, you're next." And I don't think that worked out too well as Bama.
No, I think that ended up a little more bulletin board fodder than anything else.
59-0. So I would say Bama handed it to Vandy pretty good. So, that was a game. The South Carolina escaped with the kicker. First field goal ever against Louisiana Tech. So Carolina in the SEC East. LSU went past Syracuse. Tennessee, who are our next opponent, escaped. I wouldn't say escaped. I mean, they did beat UMass, but a low-level opponent that hadn't won a game all season.
Right.
And we'll circle back to that. And then the Florida-Kentucky contest, which was pretty close. So that was an unbelievable game down to the wire, and a pure snafu on defensive coverage there for Kentucky to lose that game, basically. Absolutely. So that's the meat of the SEC East. I mean, the goal here is we got to win the SEC East, and then you know who your opponent most likely is going to be. The probability
yes.
is pretty good for that December 2nd showdown in the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But let's see, the gauntlet here is we've got to get past Tennessee. The Georgia Bulldogs travel to Neyland Stadium at Tennessee and play a Tennessee game, and I watched that game, and Tennessee has a good running game and a good quarterback. Somehow those pieces aren't coming all together for Butch Jones, though.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a chemistry it's not clicking on all three. Again, you need to have all three segments or all three aspects of your game going in the same direction, and it seems to me that they're sputtering on one or the other, and not going positive, having positive outcomes necessarily all at the same time.
Yeah, I think the offense. I mean, there are multiple teams in the SEC right now, which is unusual. That several teams in the SEC are struggling offensively, and I think Tennessee is one of those. Their total offense is ranked in the bottom half of the SEC thus far in offense. And so they've really got to get turned around. Now, that said, I wouldn't take Tennessee, Florida, or Kentucky, or even South Carolina when you look through the rest of Georgia's schedule and mix Auburn and Missouri in there too.
Sure.
But none of those games, the SEC, Coach Smart said it, week to week, you got to push that reset button. You got to come out ready to play week to week in the SEC. Next up is Tennessee. I think the Dogs are going to be favored. The Dogs are moving up in the polls, obviously, after the win against Mississippi State. But, you start believing in your hype, and
it'll bite you
in any given day. And we're going away. I mean, to an away game. So I mean, Tennessee brings out some fans. That stadium holds like 105, 110,000.
Yes.
You know they're going to be ready for the Georgia Bulldogs.
They will be intimidating. They always are up there in Tennessee. It is that road trip, and it is a hey, welcome guys. How you doing? Welcome. Put your name in the old raffle. We have some visitors here at Buffalo's Cafe, so we want to talk about how last year Georgia Bulldogs thought they had it against Tennessee.
I think fans will remember that one.
They think they will remember that, right? So I think there's a little revenge factor as well, going on, coming into this mentality. But I think we just need to watch the coaches, get them locked in on staying the course and keeping that attitude in check.
I think this staff can do that. I think that's what this staff, knowing that they have a big opponent. Now this is the heart of their schedule. I think they'll solve this away, lose your momentum type mentality. I think they'll continue to stay focused. At least that's what we're hoping for.
Absolutely.
So far, it's working well. All cylinders are firing, and this team looks sharp week in, week out. And so I think a road trip to Knoxville, this is a good time for it.
And how do you think the true freshman Jake Fromm will do on his first away game in the SEC up to a big, loud stadium?
To be honest, if you didn't tell me or nobody said anything as a true freshman, he doesn't look like a true freshman out there. He's getting accolades from his teammates. That's why I think Fromm is probably iced in the job until he would falter, because you're starting to see this camaraderie and him come in and take this leadership role.
Sure thing.
And really be a leader on the team, not just go in as a freshman and fill in. Mm-hmm. He's actually taking charge and actually managing that team offense, and that chemistry is very, very important for the Georgia Bulldogs. And
the upperclassmen are buying into it as well. A freshman coming in, basically a teenager still. Is he 19? I forget what he's coming in at.
Can't be more than 19.
Can't be much more than that, can he? So, a teenager leading men, as you could say. And I think it's something that the Georgia Bulldogs have to look forward to, because he is showing that his maturity can help win ball games.
So I think you look at the perspective coming up on Knoxville, there are certainly some things to fix. Not many, but what you always want to do is be getting better and better every week. And now you're in the heart of your SEC schedule. Right now, Florida leads the SEC East. They're 2-0 in the SEC East. Georgia's second, with their 1-0 record. And so now they all start to really, really count, with that date of December 2nd in the back of everyone's mind. No, you're not supposed to talk about it, but December 2nd is the showdown date. So
sure.
Everyone kind of has Georgia as the front runner for the SEC East, but you got to go play the game.
You have to play, and that's a good point there, Taco, that you have to play the games, and one game can run you off the tracks in the SEC. Some of these other big conferences out there, you lose a game early, you're still in it. Here, if you lose a game at any point of the season, it can railroad your season because of the, I guess you could say, any given Saturday, a team can step up and knock off a couple of teams, like your Vanderbilt has done and things like that. So they definitely have to stay the course, as I said before.
Georgia's the target now.
You're
right.
So
Georgia's the target,
and they need to take that in with the confidence of their wins, but at the same time they need to expect that they need to continue working hard across the board during those practices in between games. So we will take a short break here, Taco, and we'll come back. We are on Facebook Live on the CRM Sports Network, and we will be back here in just a moment. So stick with us here on DawgDial. We'll be right back. Go Dogs.
I don't have any other nuggets except flea flicker. I could.
There we go. Okay.
But yeah, we should roll it.
Here we go.
Roll tape.
Well, here we go. Hello, welcome back to DawgDial on CRM Sports Network. We are here in Buffalo's Cafe in Woodstock, Georgia. I'm your host, Josh Mendlinger, with Taco Thompson, my partner in crime here. And we are broadcasting, and our flagship radio station is Real Country Q92.3 WMOQ FM in where? Athens, Monroe. Right. Absolutely. And if you'd like a podcast, a copy of our podcast today of today's show, or any of nearly our 250 episodes of DawgDial, simply go to iTunes on the iTunes network and search for DawgDial in the podcast section. We'd be happy to have you download those podcasts and then watch them and give us your feedback, as you can reach us on Twitter, Facebook. On Twitter, our handle being @DawgDial, and on Facebook, obviously, just go to our comments section on Facebook, and you can type in during our Facebook Live or after the fact, and we'll be more than happy to comment or receive your comments and talk about them on our next broadcast, or if you can get it in today. What's that?
We'll get Harry.
We'll get Harry Dog to answer. Yes, our guest host today, Harry Dog, looming over our shoulders here, who did a great job. So, again, we are on the CRM Sports Network, and if you'd like to email us, please feel free to email us at georgia@crmsports.com. Here at DawgDial, Taco, we are wrapping up this coverage of the Mississippi State Bulldogs bash that the Georgia Bulldogs put on. We are here, as we mentioned, here at Buffalo's Cafe. They have the bash nights for bash wing nights, where all you can eat wings, and that's exactly what the Georgia Bulldogs did to their SEC opponent this past week.
They did what they had to do. So you come out, they come to your house with some hype and, quite honestly, some mojo. And the Bulldogs, right from the get-go, got the lead early and took it to the other Bulldogs. So sent them back home to Mississippi. And now looking at the slate, Georgia has to feel pretty good about where they are. They've had wins at App State, had a notable win, Notre Dame, beat another Bulldog setup at Samford, and this time Mississippi State, quite possibly the second best team in the SEC West, and now preparing to go to Tennessee and handle the next contest. And that's what you can do, is go week to week, as we talked about. Tennessee, Butch Jones and the Volunteers have to get some things together. I saw in the conference where Coach Jones was talking about, they just didn't play well. So be prepared for Tennessee coming up to play better in Neyland Stadium when the Dogs come to town. With the target on you, everybody's going to want to be gunning for you down. So
absolutely.
That's the Georgia Bulldogs mantra now. So just make sure you take care of business week in and week out. After that, and we'll go. Why don't we go through some predictions here the next couple of 3 games? Get ahead of ourselves.
Sure thing. We have a few moments.
What's going to happen at Tennessee?
Well, I think the Dogs are going to roll in there. I think they will be greeted by I guess you could say, a loud, crazy bunch of fans that will be intimidating. I think that's going to be a tough setting for a true freshman quarterback to come in and play. He showed that he can handle it for the most part, up at, game against Notre Dame, but this is the SEC. You can only imagine that he is going to be a little nervous, a little more nervous than he would be, but I think they do step up. I think they win. I think they win convincingly. I don't think it'll be a blowout like this past week, but I think they will win convincingly by probably 2 touchdowns.
2 TDs?
Yeah, I think about 2, yeah.
I'm going to go at it with 35-10. I think Georgia comes out and is very, very strong, does that balanced attack. I think Coach Chaney's going to have another couple of wrinkles. You're seeing wrinkles every week. Whether or not we see Eason in the game, that's maybe as the week goes along, we'll hear and see more about his health and whether or not he's able. But, it's a good problem to have. You have 2 great quarterbacks.
Sure.
Both are young quarterbacks. You have a stable running backs again, so not a bad deal. I think the cannon is loaded going up to Knoxville. After that, we're going Knoxville. We're going to stay in Tennessee. We're going to head over to Nashville.
Right, you got to go over to Vanderbilt, who came out strong out of the gates the first 3 games, and then this past weekend, as you mentioned earlier, ran into a buzzsaw, a little bit of a buzzsaw down in Alabama.
They got rolled, and I think Vanderbilt is up and coming, but make sure that when you meet a non-conference opponent, some of that preseason hype, obviously by now, has been settled on the field. So maybe the win against Kansas State, a ranked opponent, gave them a little bit too much mojo. They just didn't have anything in the tank, nothing to throw at Alabama. Alabama just absolutely rolled athletically. The 2 deeps, not any points on the board for Vandy. So I think the Bulldogs where Bama is. Would Georgia beat Vandy 59-0? Probably not. But I would venture to say that you would have a prediction that says Georgia can pretty much handle Vandy pretty strong.
I think this is not going to be a repeat of previous years where Vandy somewhat comes in and not so much surprises Georgia. I think in the past, Vandy has come in and the Georgia Bulldogs have taken it almost for granted that it's going to be an automatic W. And I think the Georgia Bulldogs in the past have not been as pumped up and ready to fight that game. But I think getting back to our discussion earlier on the culture that has been brought in and is being sold into this program by the new coaching staff and second-year coaching staff, that, hey, they are not going to take anybody lightly. They're going to be prepared. And
we've got 3 at home.
Right.
In all SEC East contests. So the schedule sets up well now for Georgia. They just have to go out and get it done.
They do, and I think they will. We talked about that from our first broadcast of the year when we did our season predictions. We said that, hey, there's a possibility of the Georgia Bulldogs running the table. We don't want to get ahead of that quite yet, but we definitely say that they're looking good. And I think
we've got
looking good so far.
Comments out there on the website. People are already saying that December 2nd, it's a Georgia-Alabama showdown.
They are. We've had a few comments like that even today. And every day the national press and media polls are starting to buy in, and I just think Coach Smart will control the chest pounding, and I think he's going to limit that. The showing off, limit the big head swelling.
But you can't help thinking about it.
No.
It's the Mercedes.
No, it's calling, isn't it?
It's fun to think about.
Right.
A big rematch there.
Forward to is some great football up in the upcoming future and some great efforts by all the teams, or all the special teams, offense, defense, and we look forward to talking about that more on DawgDial. Just want to close out our show mentioning that the executive producer of DawgDial is John Rawl. And my co-host, I'd like to thank him for being out here at Buffalo's today, my co-host Taco Thompson, and special guest, thanks to the management and servers here at Buffalo's today. And I'm Josh Mendlinger. Thank you for listening to DawgDial. Today, DawgDial is a a production of CRM Sports. For more info, visit crmsports.com. Thank you for joining us on DawgDial Facebook Live, as well as on our podcast, Go Dogs.